Hi, I'm Meanwhile Games. The last couple of weeks, I've been working on a prototype of a turn-based robot sports RPG. Let me back up a bit. Lately, I've been pondering the architecture of turn-based games. I've always struggled with them, but I've also recently been learning more about functional programming languages, and I was curious if they were a good fit. Also seemed like a good time to pick up a game idea I've been sitting on for years. I arrange my work around answering questions. This project's questions were, is it a good idea to write a turn-based game's logic in a functional programming language and then integrate it into a more traditional game environment like Unity? The other question was, is this turn-based robot sports RPG an idea with potential? I've decided the answers are no, not really, and yeah, I think so. I'll start with the latter. In high school, I was involved in a first robotics competition team, which was a really great experience. If you're not familiar with FRC, the basic idea is that teams have 6 weeks to design and construct a robot to play a game that was revealed at the very beginning of those 6 weeks. Then they bring their robots to regional competitions and form alliances with other teams. The really interesting thing about this, from a game design perspective at least, is the diversity of robot designs. Every single one works differently. It has different strengths, limitations, and trade-offs. And that makes for really interesting on-the-fly strategy as you try to figure out how to best work with your alliance's robots and counter the other alliances. And so I imagined I could make a game out of this. I imagined it as a turn-based RPG battle, somewhere between Pokemon and Final Fantasy's active time battle system. Revisiting the idea, I decided to try a paper prototype, which is something pretty new to me. While it was a bit exhausting to run around pretending to be 6 different robots, half of which were opposing the others, and the balance was definitely completely off, I definitely did see some potential. There were interesting choices to be made and risks to take. I came up with 6 distinct and terribly imbalanced robot designs, but they each played slightly differently, which is great. That's exactly the feeling that inspired the game. So my next steps, I think, are to write simple AI scripts for most of the robots so that I can just focus on strategic decisions for only a couple of players. I'd also be interested to try some mechanics where you create your robots out of parts. Right now you just have character sheets. Now for the technical side, which, as I mentioned, wasn't quite as successful, although I definitely don't regret trying it. If you're not familiar with functional programming, it's a programming philosophy that's an alternative, in a sense, to object-oriented programming. OOP focuses on locating data and logic together, while functional programming focuses on avoiding and controlling side effects and mutations. In simpler terms, state changing over time. There's a lot more nuances to the differences than I can cover here, but it's really fascinating. I'd recommend doing some research on it if you're into programming. The fundamental unit of a functional programming language is the pure function, a function that just takes input and returns output without causing or depending on any other side effects. The same input will always produce the same output, regardless of the state of the system. The input is immutable, meaning it won't ever change, and the function can't change it. And it won't cause anything else to happen. It won't do any I/O. It won't write any global or shared variables. These kinds of functions have a lot of benefits, and a lot of it is that they're incredibly easy to validate by testing them, either automatically through unit tests or even manually just through a REPL. You just provide input and make sure it returns the expected output. Obviously not every function can be pure, but you might be surprised how many can be. One example from the JavaScript world is a pattern/library called Redux. Instead of changing the state of your application directly, you instead dispatch action objects and write functions that, given the previous state and an action, return the next state. And that's how I came to this project. I realized that in a turn-based game, it's not enough to just update the state of the game. The updates need to happen in a predictable and orderly sequence so that the player can track it. If you've ever played a complex board game, you've probably run into a situation where you had to double check the rulebook because multiple things were going to happen, and the order in which they had to happen would actually have a huge impact on all of the players involved. And the same thing applies even on a micro level. Look at this sequence from a Pokemon battle. Notice how it writes the text block, then it shows the attack animation, then it shakes the screen, then it drains the HP bar. Nothing's happening at the same time. This makes it much easier to follow what's happening. This is something I struggled with in my previous OOP turn-based games. It was natural to emit and respond to events, but I didn't have any kind of central orchestration, and so the events just flew all over the place. That's what went well in this new project. It was so much more structured than previous attempts. The difficulty came in integrating the functional logic with Unity. Surprisingly, not so much because of the fundamental differences between functional programming and Unity's architecture, but really just the technical hurdle of writing a game in two different languages. I might talk about that in more detail to a part 2 to this video, but this one's already taken a long time to edit, so I need a break. I won't be putting up a download for this prototype since it's mostly technical and doesn't have any real gameplay, but I'll definitely be returning to this project. I'm interested to see where it can go. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.